Good morning. My name is Marlene DeSalta. I'm with the Southern New Jersey Development Council. I'd like to thank you for being here with us this morning. This is our 40th Sound Off for South Jersey. And I will let Mark Giantonio tell you how long we've been at this facility, but my personal thanks to Mark for hosting us. But I think what we want to do today is start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would rise, we will give our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So lots to tell you about. These are all housekeeping notes, but important ones, and then we'll get right into our breakfast and our program. We have a lot of sponsors, so if you would bear with me, I think it's really important that we acknowledge those who have supported today's event and many of our past events. So, from AT&T, Joe Divis, Atlantic City Electric, Susan Cohn, Comcast, Kathy Fernaccio, Jefferson Health, Lisa Marina, New Jersey American Water, Dave Mayer, New Jersey Natural Gas, Mike Manzik, PCS, Anthony Mongaluzzo, PSEG, Jim Gilroy, Rowan University, Joe Cardona, Sheet Metals Worker Local 19, Brian Bush, South Jersey Gas, Rich DeRose. The closing reception sponsors, which as you know will be poolside, and we'll direct you to the pool when we're finished. GEI Consultants, Chris Daly, Infinity Energy, Fernanda Zarita, Legacy Treatment Services, Nick DeRose, New Jersey Community Capital, Laura Wallach, Rowan College of South Jersey, Candace Rossetti, South Jersey Port Corporation, Jonathan Atwood. Our lanyard sponsor, which you are all wearing, is ELEC 825, Kate Gibbs. And if that weren't enough, we have corporate sponsors. Atlantic Cape Community College, Dr. Gaba is here. Thank you, Dr. Gaba. BD Engineering, Brian Tannehouse, First Harvest Credit, Ernie Huggard, First National Bank of Elmer, Matthew Haynes, Fox Rothschild, Michael Viscount, French and Perillo, Julia Maroney, Greenman Peterson, Dale Foster, GZA Environmental, Joe D'Antonio, Hutchinson Mechanical Services, Mike Hutchinson, Orsted, Tom Southard, PCH Technology, Tim Gwynn, Performance Marketing, Glenn DeVilla, PSE&G, Addie Cologne, Stanker and Galetto, Ethan Byler, Stokes Creative Group, Barbara Ziegler, Thomas Boyd Communications, Pam Boyd, Triad Associates, Mike Zampino, Volunteers of America, Delaware Valley, Alexis Deegan, and you will also see them listed on the signs and on the slides as well. So, a big round of applause for today's sponsors. A couple more housekeeping notes. You'll receive an email with photos and a recording of today's program. The photography and videography is courtesy of Stokes Creative Group, and so thank you to Barbara Ziegler. Also, you'll get another email with an online survey, which we ask that you fill out and return. It helps us year after year to make this a better event. And on your table at your place, you will see the Chronicle. Please take a look through that. Excellent information. The theme is transportation, so many of you will find that interesting. We will see a few legislators this morning, more than a few. Let me just point them out to you. Not all have arrived, but State Senator Mike Testa will be here, Senator Vince Palestina, Senator Troy Singleton, Assembly Majority Leader Lou Greenwald, Assemblyman Bill Moen, Assemblywoman Beth Sawyer, Gloucester County Commissioner Heather Simmons, We have a few mayors that we'd like to say hello to. Woodbine Borough Mayor Picolicki, Hamilton Township Mayor Charles Kane, Camden City Councilwoman Shanika Boucher, and Thetford Township Councilman Ken Barnshaw. So you'll say hello to them as the morning proceeds. Also, I have a wonderful relationship with my colleagues from the various chambers around South Jersey. Cape May County Chamber President Emily Paul, new, so congratulations, Emily, and good luck to you. Gloucester County Chamber President Janet Garrity, New Jersey Chamber of Commerce Executive Vice President Mike Egginton, and say hello to them when you have a minute. And if you're not a member of those chambers, please do consider it. They do such wonderful work, and they're great friends to us. So with that, I will turn this program to the Vice Chair of the Development Council and also the Chairwoman for today's event, Lisa Marina, who is with Jefferson Health. Lisa. Okay. It's all yours.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So I'm going to put my glasses on. As my great niece said, Aunt Lisa, you wear glasses, and I said only when I want to see. So good morning, everyone. Lisa Marina, I'm Vice Chair for the Development Council, as Marlene mentioned, and I'm pleased to be here today as the chair of this event. My cape that I wear by day is Vice President for Government and External Relations for Jefferson Health. So today I come to you with a lot of different hats. I want to welcome you all here today. This is the 40th annual, as Marlene mentioned, and that it really is a significant milestone for the organization. We've been at the forefront of policy and legislative conversations for many, many years, and this is a great opportunity for all of us to gather as we further that conversation. I did just want to note, I saw also here today Councilwoman from Glassboro, Danielle Spence, who does a great job, and so I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge her with that. We have an excellent program today. We have great conversations planned for you. But while we serve breakfast, we want to present to you this brief video from Visit South Jersey. Thank you, Visit South Jersey, for that great video. It's definitely like a catchy little tune. I saw some head bobbing. I swear I thought I saw Senator Testa tapping his toe to it. So we all appreciate Visit South Jersey's music for that video. So it's my privilege to thank our committee today. We have a pretty big committee that helps to put this program together. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to thank our committee members briefly. As Marlene has mentioned, there's a number of these people also are our sponsors, and their contributions to Development Council do not go unnoticed. Dr. Anthony DeFabio from Ascenda Integrated Health, Marshall Spivak, Advocacy and Management Group, Nick Aselta, Aselta and Company Consulting, Maria Gutierrez from AT&T, Mike Haggerty, Camden County Improvement Authority, Kathy Farinaccio with Comcast, Julia Maroney from French and Perillo Associates, Frank Jones from Mintz Insurance, Karen Elkis, Optimus Partners, Glenn Davila, Performance Marketing, Will Gruccio, Rinaldi Solutions, Dr. Joe Cardona, Rowan University, and Rich DeRose, South Jersey Industries. Please give them all a warm welcome, a warm round of applause. At this time, I'd like to ask Mark Giantonio, President and CEO of Results, to say a few words to you. And here he comes.
Thank you, Lisa. It's wonderful to welcome you back. Marlene, thanks for choosing Resorts now 10 years in a row out of your 40, so about 25% of your meetings have been held here, and we could not be happier. It's great to see many of you I consider friends, and hopefully I'll have a chance to say hello. But, that video, I think, said it all. We're really blessed to work and live and play here in South Jersey. It's a remarkable area. And all I can tell you is, on behalf of all of the casinos in Atlantic City, we really are going to be focused on the redevelopment of South Jersey, particularly Atlantic City. And you look out right outside on the boardwalk and the beautiful beach that we have and boardwalk. There's so much to be done. We certainly are going to be facing some economic headwinds, but now's the time to fix things. Now's the time to get us prepared for the next decade or two. And the Atlantic City Casino Association, and certainly Resorts in my ownership, will be working very hard on behalf of everybody that's involved, all of our employees, and hopefully working along with all of you. So thank you so much, and enjoy your meal.
Mark, thank you so much. We're going to take a brief break while you're enjoying your breakfast, and we'll be back with our first panel momentarily.
We'll have a more collaborative conversations around how to advance issues and projects that'll move South Jersey forward, regardless of whose name is on the masthead and whose district it's in.
Thanks, Senator. Speaking somewhat of infrastructure, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the environmental justice work that you've done and how important that is in your district, as well as DEP regulations and how they're impacting both of your districts.
So, look, I was proud to have been the author of New Jersey's environmental justice law. I think it boils down to me very simply that no community should have a greater environmental burden than benefit. And the work that we've tried to do from the legislative standpoint is to make sure that communities who so often have been voiceless in those decisions of the siting of various facilities in their neighborhoods have an opportunity to have a voice, to be able to speak out. The regulatory process is making its way now. I don't speak of a level of knowledge on the regulation process. That's why I'm a legislator, not an administrator, as it goes in that regard. But I know there's been some challenges. There's been some continued tension between my friends in the business community, labor community, and those of us who advance that legislation forward. I think where we try and get it to is trying to walk that fine line to say it is not mutually exclusive for us to have economic development and economic benefit and make sure people have a clean environment in which they can live, breathe, and work and play. So I'm optimistic about the regulation. I've chided the department on some components of it that I think have been a diversion from where the spirit of the legislation has been. And thankfully, they've started to listen to some of those things. I know there's a whole host of others who have broader concerns about that. But the piece that I would just end on is the EJ communities are all throughout our state. They're not just concentrated in our urban population. And we tried to make that point home because there are communities that are being affected by that. There's a couple plants in my legislative district where there's no metropolis in our legislative district in Burlington County, but the people of those communities are also being affected. We want to make sure they have a voice in those decisions.
Senator Test.
You know, I'm glad to hear Senator Singleton, speak about how he believes some of the regulations have diverted from the true spirit and intent of the legislation. I can tell you in my legislative district, and I know that Atlantic County shares these concerns, NJ PACT has really affected the Bayshore communities that exist in Cumberland County and in Cape May County, but mostly in Cumberland County. I can tell you right now that they feel that some of these regulations are effectively trying to move them out. So I think that there needs to be a broader conversation with the NJDEP and how they are enforcing these regulations, because these aren't wealthy people that have bayfront homes.
Right.
They've been in these communities a very long time, multi-generational, and really we suffer from something that's more akin to rural poverty, even in the Bayshore communities. And I just think if we're going to really have that real conversation about environmental justice, like think about this, Down Township is finally getting sewer. I mean, they haven't had sewer. I mean, these are very basic things that most New Jerseyans take for granted in their everyday lives, yet this is a huge win for Down Township to finally be able to have some level of development. So I'm hopeful, and look, if you live in a Bayshore community and you live in any type of community that has the beach, you don't want to see the environment destroyed by any stretch. You want to conserve the environment. You want to preserve that so that people will come there. But you also have to have some level of development, and development has been effectively stomped out in our Bayshore community because they don't have basics like water and sewer. So I think that also needs to be a component of a broader conversation when it comes to environmental justice.
Thank you. So Governor Murphy recently signed an executive order directing the State Department of Human Services to lead and monitor the distribution of a $641 million settlement coming to New Jersey, part of that $26 billion nationwide payout that helped fuel the opioid crisis. Half of the monies are going to the state, the other half will be divided between local governments. First of all, is this enough money to address this issue in our communities? And is this the appropriate way that these monies should be allocated? What are your thoughts on what should be done further?
So the answer is no, it's not enough money. And it's unfortunate that it's not enough money. Many in this room, and myself included, our families have been touched by the scourge of substance abuse and how it's impacted people's lives and families. So the $641 million that's coming to the state of New Jersey, unfortunately, is not enough to address those concerns. That being said, we believed in the legislature that there was a course that we proposed to take for those settlement funds. The Senate, in a bipartisan and unanimous way, passed that, which outlined what we believe how that money should be diverted, real attention on trying to get in front of kids so they don't get hooked on drugs and stop that, and providing all the necessary tools that our substance abuse coordinators and professionals need to be able to address this issue. That legislation has already passed the Senate. It's already sitting over in the Assembly, and we're hopeful that our colleagues over there will move it expeditiously as well. But the governor's roadmap to that mirrors a lot of what we have talked about. Not identical, it's mirrored a lot about what we have talked about, but I believe with largesse of that amount, and then another settlement that just got announced right behind that, another $420 million national settlement from a company called Endo, and the New Jersey's piece of that has not been identified as of yet. I think it's appropriate for the legislature to help identify the parameters on which that money should be spent. So we're hopeful, at least I am, that the Assembly makes its effort to put it to the governor's desk, and it gives us those parameters in place.
Thank you.
I think that amount of money is the start of the conversation, not the end. That's where I'm really hoping this is. For those that know me pretty well, they know I'm not a big fan of Governor Murphy's executive orders. I truly believe, again, as Senator Singleton pointed out, this was a unanimous, bipartisan piece of legislation that went through the Senate. I think that we should truly be working together in the checks and balances system that, our forefathers believed in. A component of my private practice is criminal defense. I've seen the scourge of what opioids have done across our state. Just this past week, I was with Governor McGreevey as a panelist in Seton Hall on this issue. I don't think the money is going to be enough because I always fear that it's going to get locked up in bureaucracy rather than actually getting to the people that desperately need the funds. And I think that, we need to fund organizations like Governor McGreevey's Pathway Back programs that he's instituted. I truly believe that a lot of these individuals who not only got hooked on opioids, then committed crimes to further their addiction, which then placed them into the criminal justice system. And look, if someone's committed a violent crime, I want to be very clear on this. They belong incarcerated and pay their debt to society. If someone is just a drug user, a drug addict, that's what our recovery court is for. And Judge Sanson out of Atlantic County is the one who actually changed the nomenclature from drug court to recovery court, so that this way it took away some of the stigma. And I think that's a big part of all of this too, is removal of the stigma. The educational component is going to be huge, that Senator Singleton touched upon. But this is really the start of a conversation, because we're going to be feeling this, especially as there was a major spike in use during the lockdown of COVID-19. We're going to see this in an unfortunate ripple effect for years to come. And I think this is, like I said, again, the beginning of the conversation, not the end. That I don't think that can be just, this is the amount of money and this is what we're going to give to it. We have to really study this issue. We have to really institute an educational policy. And for people that are coming out of incarceration, I think that there's some hand-holding process to get their identifications back, which is something that Governor McGreevey is actually working with Hendricks House out of Millville right now, which is in my legislative district, because of a couple phone calls that we had. These individuals, they want to get back to work. And they have employment waiting for them. They don't even have birth certificates, driver's licenses, social security cards. We need organizations like that to hold their hand through the process just to get back to a starting point.
And Bridget, just to piggyback off of Senator Tester's point, because he was spot on. Governor Christie had a line that he said that I think for those of us who really are passionate about this issue is symbolic of it. He says there's no throwaway lives. And truly, there are no throwaway lives in our society. And now I think we as a society, as a people, have grown to see what substance abuse really is. It is almost a disease that folks need help to try and work their way through. And to have avenues and opportunities like Senator Tester talked about, where folks can rebuild their lives. We're going to need more resources to be able to do that. But thankfully, as we see the sort of pendulum shift on how we think about substance abuse, there's committed legislators on the Democratic and Republican side here in New Jersey, and dare I say nationally, who are committed to continuing to provide the resources necessary to make sure we don't throw away lives anymore.
I mean, I think that we can all agree this is not a partisan issue, right? There's probably every person in the room has been touched or knows somebody who has a relative or a friend who's been touched by opioid addiction in the state, right? Do you think that the kind of balance of focusing on prevention and the kind of programs that Mike was talking about in terms of reintegration and workforce support, where should the focus be? Should it be, in preventing young people today from
everywhere?
Yeah.
I think it needs to be everywhere. And you said this, the other day, again, with Governor McGreevey and his reentry program, I think people were somewhat surprised because they see me as a staunch conservative, which I am. But, there is such a thing as a compassionate conservative. And I hope that I exemplify that. There's partisan issues, there's bipartisan issues. This is a human being issue. As Governor Christie said and Senator Singleton pointed out, there are no throwaway lives. I mean, I don't really understand when someone has the mentality, they'll say, well, Michael, you're willing to spend that kind of money? I'm like, these are human beings. These aren't numbers in a chart somewhere or a statistic. That's a human being. And what's really interesting, and I just want to touch upon this because it was such proof that we live in a very small world. The gentleman by the name of Rob Carter, who's with Governor McGreevey's reentry program, we were just chatting at Hendricks House in Millville last week. It turns out he was in recovery with my childhood best friend.
Wow.
I mean, all of a sudden we're just chatting, and he goes, hey, I happen to know a guy named Rob from Vineland. I was in recovery with him in Discovery House in 2004. And I said, I think I know who you're talking about. And it was literally my childhood best friend. So to the senator's point, we all have been touched by this, whether it's family, friends,
Right.
relatives. You know, it's something that I don't think that we can just decide, hey, look, this is where we're going to cut the money off.
Right.
So, Mike, let's switch gears a little bit. You're primary sponsor of Senate Bill 2079, the Tourism Fair Tax Share Bill, which essentially would switch the proportion of revenue that local municipalities, counties receive from the occupancy tax on hotels from 40% to 100%. I read the bill. As a person who lives about 4 miles down the beach, I'm very appreciative of this measure. First of all, talk a little bit about it, if you would, and how do you think that this measure is going to help municipalities like here in Atlantic County, but also in Cape May County, in terms of their ability to build infrastructure? My understanding from reading the bill is that this would support programming in arts, it would support infrastructure, it would support historic preservation, and essentially give those funds that are being collected on the local level back to the municipalities.
Okay, I think that we would need to talk about a city like Wildwood first. You know, when I first got elected in that special election in 2019, I met with the county freeholders first, as they were known then, now county commissioners, and I tried to go to the municipalities that would have a discussion with me. And Mayor Byron out of Wildwood, I said, hey, what do you need? And he said, I need $80 million to repair the boardwalk. I said, oh, is that all? And, you know, and I started to look at legislation and the fairness aspect of it. And this goes to a fundamental fairness aspect, not just for South Jersey, but now our shore communities. And I said, well, geez, you know, Governor Murphy and I agree on something. And that is, I think everybody should have access to the beach. You know, and I get that there are a lot of shore towns that have beach tags. I get it. I was a lifeguard in the city of Wildwood, so I happen to have a lot of love for the city of Wildwood. It was my first job ever. I truly believe that as New Jerseyans, we should have access to our beaches. That's my opinion. Others may differ from me. If that's the case, and Wildwood is the people's beach, it's free, the hotel taxes should be able to stay there to support those hundreds of thousands of people that walk that boardwalk and have normal wear and tear. Now, granted, that's not to talk about the maybe poor fiscal planning that municipalities have had for a number of years, that they need an $80 million fix, because I truly believe that there probably should be a capital improvement fund. But that could be the start of that capital improvement fund to fund the repairs to really an economic engine for all of Cape May County, and I would venture to say South Jersey, because, you know, I lifeguarded in Wildwood. There's New Yorkers, people from Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Canada. You know, Cape May County's the only county that I'm aware of in the state of New Jersey that actually has an office in another country, in Canada, because they bring so many tourists down to Cape May County. And if we're able to keep a larger component of just those taxes, I truly believe that you'll see a much better infrastructure. And that's not even getting to the bridges and county roads that are in desperate need of repair throughout southern New Jersey.
So you have an assembly co-sponsor, and where is this legislation now? I mean, is there hope that, for example, a municipality, you know, the legislators from Jersey City or Hoboken, for example, who might also derive some benefit from this, is there the chance of them also getting on board for this measure? And where is Senate President Scutari on this?
So I actually spoke to the Senate President yesterday. I mean, I know where our former Senate
You knew I
President-
was going to ask that, didn't you?
I did, and thank you for that. I thank you. You know, she prognosticated some of her questions to me, and that was great. So I did speak to the Senate President yesterday, and he's taking a long, hard look at it. Obviously, it's a huge leap from 40% to 100%, but something needs to be done. There's, you know, if it, like, again, I'll use Wildwood as the example. They don't charge for the hundreds of thousands of people to utilize their beach. If they did, you know, they'd probably be able to pay for their boardwalk in a much quicker fashion. However, people are already paying the hotel tax, the occupancy tax. That money should be able to stay right where it was paid to fund infrastructure. I mean, it's really simple to me. I don't think it's a real complex matter that, hey, the municipalities in which the money is spent should be able to keep it so that they can fund their own infrastructure. And the arts, I mean, because of Cape May County, I know the Cape May County Chamber's here. I'll give a shout out to the Cape May County Chamber. You know, there's so many places to visit in Cape May County related to the arts. But again, what I said from the very beginning and I think Senator Singleton agrees with me, South Jersey needs better infrastructure. So if we are attracting money to South Jersey, it should stay in South Jersey. And if for legislators throughout the state that have people visiting them, guess what? They should be able to keep their money too. It shouldn't go to Trenton and fall into what we, at least I call on my side of the aisle, the black hole of the general fund.
So Michael's absolutely right, and it's consistent with legislation that many of us, again, on a bipartisan fashion, have worked together on, with our energy gross receipts tax. It's trying to keep it in the local coffers. And as someone, when I was, born in Philadelphia in the early years, spent a great deal of time in Wildwood, and my family, we have our family home in Ocean City. And through my college years, a lot of nights I don't remember in Sea Isle City at all. The Jersey Shore is special, right? And this area is incredibly special to all of us in South Jersey. So, and the work that Michael and others have put in on this is to be complimented, but it's our obligation, going back to what we started with, right? It's like, this benefits Southern New Jersey. And it's not an idea where, me being supportive, and just to be clear, I am supportive of the work that Michael is doing on this bill and supportive of this bill. It doesn't matter that I'm supportive of it. Like, there's not one vote that I'll ever get out of Cape May in Atlantic County. That's not my area.
Right.
But because it benefits so many of my constituents who go down to the Jersey Shore and spend such a great deal of time down there, they want to see a boardwalk that's in impeccable condition, and the need to not have to do, as Michael said, do the $80 million quick fix or big fix all at once. To have the resources to be able truly to develop a program and plan to make it the greatest, shore that we know that it is. So, that's something that all of us together should be working towards to try and make happen.
Thanks. So I want to take a little liberty and talk a little bit about something that I'm passionate about. You mentioned you're a Stockton alumni.
No.
I'm sorry, you're a Rowan alumni.
No, please don't
Villanova,
ever do that.
is that right?
The Rowan table's here. I won't be able to go back to campus. Homecoming's coming up soon. Don't do me like that.
He wishes he was a Stockton alumni. I'm a Stockton alumni, and I don't know if
Richard, you're going to get me in
anyone...
trouble.
So is my brother, by the way.
All right. So I don't know if any of you all had the opportunity to come to resorts from the southern end of the city, but what Stockton is doing down in southern Atlantic City, what is now the University District, is simply amazing, right? It is transformative. It is clearly an economic driver of the region. And, Troy, you mentioned Senator Sweeney and his important role that he played, particularly in ensuring and ushering that part of state funding through for Atlantic City. Mike, you talked a little bit about the South Jersey Coalition. What more can be done to support higher education, particularly higher education funding, when it comes to the kind of important role that higher education is playing as an economic driver, not just in Atlantic City, but in places, it could be in places like Vineland and other areas. We see it happening in Camden with Rowan University and Cooper University, the new development there announced last week. What more could be done to ensure that we're getting our fair share of that piece of the pie?
So Rowan and Stockton are somewhat lucky that they have fighters that are on the budget committee, like Senator Singleton, like myself. We talk about tag money and how in North Jersey universities, the tag money is more per student. My personal opinion, and this was brought to me by Dr. Harvey Kesselman. He said to me, Michael, if you had twin daughters, and one goes to Rutgers and one goes to Stockton, and they're from New Jersey, they're getting a different amount of money. That doesn't make any sense to me. If we're going to have a real discussion about fairness, about equity, we have to have that discussion about Southern New Jersey universities. I have to give a shout out to a mentor of mine, John Scarpa, by the way. You see his name all over.
Of course.
You see his name all over Stockton University, and he's a guy from Vineland who has just been so generous. We need to also find philanthropists like that who have deep pockets, who like to see their name on buildings, and they deserve them to have their name on the building, because you look around and you see the great work that he's doing all over, what he's done at my alma mater at Villanova and what he's done at Stockton University. But what can we do? We need to have those lines of communication open between college presidents like Dr. Kesselman, Dr. Hushmand. A few weeks ago, we had a forum at Rowan College of South Jersey, what used to be Cumberland County College, where, Dr. Fred Keating was there from Rowan College of South Jersey. We had Dr. Hushmand. So I think before, everybody is always in their own silos. I think we need to have the open discussion and have more stakeholders in the room to discuss with your legislators. And, I know Senator Palestina was integral as well in fighting for Stockton University's budgetary
Absolutely.
gains, as was I on the budget committee. Rowan obviously has always had the champion of Senate President Sweeney. I mean, that's $280 million, of investment has been made at Rowan University while Senate President Sweeney was the Senate President. That can't be discounted. To Senator Singleton's point, we have big shoes to fill collectively because I'm friends with Senator Scutari. He's our Senate President, but he's not a South Jersey guy. We had a big South Jersey voice who also carried a large stick. There's no doubt about that. So I think if we continue to have these conversations in an open forum and not keeping in our own silos, and COVID, I think, kept us in our own silos and maybe even made us go back to more silos, that we have to have more open conversation between college presidents and the legislature as to what do you need? Because if I don't get the phone call, I don't know.
Yeah. And Bridget, look, Michael said this, I firmly believe silos are for farms, not for public policy, right? And one of the things that Dr. Kesselman, who I count as a dear friend and will miss greatly at his upcoming retirement, one of the things that they asked us, they said, hey, we need more through the budget for more FTE dollars, full-time equivalent dollars for those not familiar with the nomenclature. And we've been able to do that for the last 2 years, right? So we may not have had great bipartisan votes on every budget, and we did this last cycle. We've talked about our mutual friend, Senator Palestina, who was supportive of the broader budget. But on budget resolutions just like that one, that benefited Stockton, we had broad bipartisan support. Absolutely. On the budget resolution for the new vet school that many of us were proud to champion, I being one of those and Michael being another, that had broad bipartisan support because that's how we become transformative, using higher education as a vehicle to promote and enhance workforce development in our state. So we've begun to continue to work together to fill that void. And those are just two clear examples in the higher education space. And I'm proud to continue my dialogue with my friends from Stockton and Rowan and Rutgers-Camden as well to talk to them about the things that they need. And we're going to continue to do that as long as it benefits our entire region.
Well, and you bring up a good point, and I know that Senator Palestina has been active on this issue as well, and that is ensuring that higher education is reflecting the needs of the business community and that we're training tomorrow's workforce in the kind of skills that businesses in the state need. Is there a role that, for example, you two could play or the legislature in general in terms of making sure that that funding goes to programs that are addressing the needs of the business community?
Well, we did legislation just a few short years ago that became law that did exactly that set aside funding to make sure when folks are having those partnerships between the business community and higher ed, they had the resources necessary to help incubate those partnerships. And we'll just continue to keep doubling down on those as we look at the success of those endeavors. That's where our role comes in. I think our obligation is to perhaps help set the guideposts and framework and provide some of the resources necessary to be able to do that, but also set the policy direction to be focused and say, this is how we grow a better workforce, through that collaborative partnership. The piece I would say is in my days in the Carpenters Union, we used to go to companies, larger companies, and say to them, what do you need your workforce to do? And then we would go to our apprentice schools and our training centers and train our folks to be able to do that. I think if we get to that sort of mindset, all right, having served as a board of trustee member at my alma mater in the past, if we get to that mindset, instead of trying to, in some places, turn out the next Socrates, let's turn out the next Bill Gates. Let's turn out the next Jeff Bezos, and let's have those conversations about how we can develop our next generation of workers.
Nothing against Socrates.
Socrates is cool.
And I think there are pictures floating around of you, Troy, in a toga.
100%.
In Seattle.
Back to those Seattle days that I don't remember. That I do not remember, but thanks for reminding me.
They're Polaroids.
Exactly. Polaroids.
Yeah, they're not digital. But, I'm co-chair of the Manufacturing Caucus. So I truly believe that manufacturing is going to be a component of the pathway back. New Jersey has suffered greatly during COVID. There's no doubt about that. I mean, and we have to look at the facts. 1/3 of all of our small businesses closed and they shut their doors forever. That's a statistic that we have to really look at and deal with. And I truly believe, look, we all know now that a four-year college isn't for every 18-year-old. It also isn't for individuals who are re-entering the workforce. I truly believe that, places like Rowan College of South Jersey, really our community colleges throughout the state can have a 6-month certificate, a year certificate, in a partnership with certain manufacturers, so that that individual can be earning a living wage while they're working, and their employer will be really encouraged to maybe pay for them to get an associate's degree at Rowan College of South Jersey, or at, Stockton doesn't have it, at one of our community colleges. And then that individual can take that 2-year degree and their skill set and maybe parlay that into a 4-year degree. Because right now, if we're going to look at the pathway back, we can't look at it as a 4-year back pathway. It needs to be quicker than that. It needs to be more immediate. And just for the listeners in the room, I'm a firm believer in manufacturing. The NJMEP statistics, that's the New Jersey Manufacturing and Extension Program, the average manufacturing job in the state of New Jersey right now is paying $95,000 per year with overtime. That's a real living wage. So if you get a young person who says, 4-year college isn't for me, maybe with a 1-year certificate, they're making $65,000, $70,000 a year with no college debt.
All right, I think that we are just about at time, so I just want to thank you both for this great conversation. It's great to see you working together. It's interesting to hear about your priorities and your passions and how they fit in with what your constituents need, and I think it was a really great conversation. So thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I knew you liked the total comment.
Good to see you.
The total comment.
Good to see you, Mike.
Really a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Take good care of it.
All right. So as we're setting up for our next panel, I just want to take a few moments to kind of recap on that, and especially thank Senator Troy Singleton, Senator Michael Testa, and our moderator, Bridget Harrison, for that great conversation. Please join me in a round of applause. So I jotted a couple of notes, and I'll see if, we can connect later to see if you also heard, but, I really thought it was interesting that the conversation hit on the three big economic drivers here in South Jersey, and that is infrastructure, eds and meds, infrastructure, eds and meds, and the bipartisanship of making sure that the South Jersey community is well represented. We do know that we have had a lot of success in our education systems, in particular in higher ed, over the past few years as we've been able to receive funding down there for Stockton University and for Rowan University, and all of us benefit from that. But I do want to just mention to both Senator Testa and to Troy Singleton, from a healthcare perspective, we're very appreciative of their laser focus on the opioid epidemic and how that has hit our industry, and not to forget that youth mental health is a very serious issue that we're dealing with right now as well. With that, and it looks like we're set for our next panel, I'd like to introduce to you our next panel moderator. Dr. Benjamin Dworkin serves as the founding director of Rowan University Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship. He currently teaches courses in the department in the Department of Political Science as well. He has appeared on numerous network and cable news shows and is frequently quoted in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the Chicago Tribune, and the Los Angeles Times. Often quoted but never duplicated. Please welcome Dr. Benjamin Dworkin.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Lisa. It's always a pleasure to partner with you again. Yes, I am Professor Ben Dworkin. I am here with my colleagues from Rowan University, including our Vice President of University Communications, Joe Cardona, and the Dean of our College of Humanities and Social Sciences, Dr. Nawal Amar. So let's just welcome them too, because they're my colleagues, please. There's an old story about a minister, a scientist, and a politician. And they are having breakfast one morning and they are arguing, as you would be sitting around today, they're arguing about whose profession has been around the longest. "Gentlemen," says the minister, "surely religion came first. After all, the entire world was created in just 6 days by the Lord himself." "Oh, come now," says the scientist, the great defender of rationality. "The world was created by the Big Bang. And therefore science is the world's oldest profession. Why, but before us, there was nothing but chaos." "Ah," says the politician, "and who do you think created the chaos?" This morning, we are privileged to bring together 4 outstanding public servants and sharp political minds to help explain the chaos and maybe even blame each other for it. We are joined this morning, and when I call you up, come on, grab a seat. From the 2nd District, we have Senator Vince Polistina. From the 6th District, Assembly Majority Leader Lou Greenwald. From the 5th District, Assemblyman Bill Moen. And from the 3rd District, Assemblywoman Beth Sawyer. I have a few questions that we're going to hopefully have a nice discussion here. Assemblywoman Sawyer, I'd like to start with you. The political pundits are all over the map when it comes to describing the economy these days. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? We have seemingly 2 job openings for every applicant, and yet we still have a stubbornly high inflation rate. Assemblywoman, how does South Jersey's economy look like in your district?
First, I want to say thank you for having me and everybody attending, and to all of our sponsors. Our economy is looking okay. It could look much better. I think that we should be focusing on what's going on in the world. We're suffering from supply chain problems. I just got back from a trip to California. I was with my son, and the amount of freight ships that were sitting in the ocean waiting to come unload was actually disturbing. I think that Jersey has an opportunity to start bringing manufacturing back to this country. As the bridge that goes into Trenton says, Trenton makes it, the world takes it. I think that we should all be focusing on that together as a group. There is plenty of opportunity in my district for future economic development. I know Orsted's been entertaining a lot of different companies in Carneys Point, or Pennsville. We also have PSE&G that has some opportunities down there, so anything that I can do to help facilitate to bring in more businesses. I also think that we need to be focusing on careers and not just jobs. PSE&G has been phenomenal at creating generational careers. I think that we need to look at what they have done and start to focus on that so that we can keep bringing people that allows them the opportunity to have a career and a lifelong career in my district.
Thank you. Majority Leader Greenwald, how about you? You're in the 6th District. It's different in terms of the kinds of communities that you represent than, say, from the Assemblywoman's. How's the economy looking in your area?
Well, I think the Assemblywoman is right when she talks about a national implication on us overall as, as a state. You can't avoid it, but I think one of the things that we've always done well, I think in South Jersey, there's a reason why we are referred to as the South Jersey delegation, not so much as counties or districts, I think is because for the 27 years that I've been doing this, whether it is with our current friends or whether it dates back to the relationships and friendships that we developed with Senator Gormley or Speaker Collins, South Jersey is an entity that really stands together and fights for things that are important. So there's a lot to be proud of right now in South Jersey. When you see the news this week of a $2 billion investment in Camden City around Cooper Hospital, level 1 trauma center that is world-class in the care that it provides, that is created because of the legislative work that we did 20 years ago on investing in cancer research, has added to MD Anderson. That's a great story. When you look at the roots of what took place in Camden, where in a tremendous bipartisan moment, President Obama stood with us, with Governor Chris Christie, to talk about how in a 60 Minutes interview, Camden City was considered one of the highest crime cities in the country, to where today the crime rate is down by over 50% in violent crime from where it was at that time. That was the beginning foundation of transforming Camden City. And that has a ripple effect to the 6th, but it also has a ripple effect to the rest of the region. And Camden City for us was always a laboratory for us to try and test case ideas, which we have now brought to Atlantic City. And when you see the investment that, I saw the last panel talk about the investment that we made in Rowan, what that means for the economic vitality of our region, the residents that live in my district that are employed by eds and meds, it's critically important. When you see the investment that we made in Stockton and how that is now transforming Stockton and how it has grown in top universities in the country in the last report that came out, that's something that we should all be proud of, done in a bipartisan effort. And the beginning of the process of transforming Atlantic City from a gaming city to a city with gaming, as we have that extra investment into the city. And then the last thing I would say is, it shouldn't be lost that New Jersey has had 3 upgrades in its credit rating since the work that we've done on the budget with the investment in making sure we have responsible surplus. We make the pension payment that we're responsible for. We invest in our public education system, #1 public education system in the country, 3 years in a row. Those are important things. And then you see private equity that is looking to New Jersey. We are 9th in the country in investment in private equity. And then our employment rate. Professor, you said it well. There's 2 jobs out there for every 1 person that's looking for it. We have an unemployment rate of 4%. So some of the things that I'm working on, again, we hope to do in a bipartisan fashion, is to create incentives to help with workforce development in some of our strongest areas, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, and certainly to attract manufacturing so that we're not dependent on outside resources anymore when we face something like the pandemic. That's our future. And that will allow us to attract people that want to come to New Jersey to take advantage of all those things we talked about. Great place to live, great place to work, great place to raise your family, great education system, and great access for good paying jobs.
Thank you. Assemblyman Moen, we just got referenced the city of Camden. It's a part of your district. For your constituents, how's the economy going there? Do we need to wait the 10 years or so for the $2 billion to come to fruition to make a real difference? Are things growing? What's your take on how the economy is in your area?
Ben, I think we're absolutely in a position where we can say with certainty that the economy is growing. The 5th District is an area that I've called home my entire life, and to see what's occurring, I think while the Majority Leader may have talked from a holistic approach of across South Jersey, I think when we look at the 5th and we look at the city of Camden, the largest city in the district, in addition to the pieces that the Majority Leader mentioned in terms of crime being at its lowest point in 50 years, let's look at things like education, where since 2011, the graduation rate in the city of Camden has increased by 20%. The dropout rate has decreased by 50%. These are things when you heard the Assemblywoman talking about workforce development, that's where the foundation begins. And so from an educational perspective, I think that's a high point for us to continue to focus on. We've heard also about, from the economic perspective, for those that do not know, the city of Camden, during the pandemic, the unemployment rate reached 15%. Right now, the unemployment rate is lower than it was before the pandemic in the city of Camden. You heard the Majority Leader talk about the Cooper investment. That's a generational investment. My daughter, who's 5 months old, will see that, and probably my grandchildren will have the chance to see that come to fruition and serve the residents of South Jersey. I'll also point to the Coriell Institute, who just over the last few months announced their new campus development on Kane Avenue in the city of Camden. Now, I understand much of that revolves around the largest city. But if we look around the rest of the district, there are signs of that economy growing as well. If you go down to the other end in Mantua, Rowan University, the Fossil Park, broke ground last October. That's something, once it is completed, I think will be a gem for educational opportunities for our children across South Jersey, but I think also for tourism. In addition to that, I think one area that on one side of the river the Majority Leader has, and on the other side, I think after redistricting I might have, the Cooper River just announced this week that they have over 12 new regattas scheduled for Cooper River in 2023, including one of the largest in the country that's coming from Philadelphia to the Cooper River because of the investment that county government had in dredging the river a few years back. These are things that as you build upon those successes, you can then point to say, hey, this is working and this is why the economy is in a better place than it was. Oh, and the last thing, the Eagles are 2-0.
Which inspires everybody. Senator Palestina, we are sitting here in the heart of your district, and obviously, because your district centers around Atlantic City, you have a different economic vibe. We just heard from the other senators a lot about this area, but from your perspective, how are things going in terms of the economy here?
Thanks, Ben, and thanks to the Southern New Jersey Development Council for having me. I appreciate wherever Marlene is. It's a mixed bag. I mean, you've heard from some of the other assembly people. You know, the unemployment rate is low, but many of us and many in the business community recognize that as a result of the pandemic, because of childcare issues or other issues, a lot of people left the workforce. And so while the unemployment rate is low, there's not as many people in the workforce. Every business out there that you talk to around here is looking for employees, hiring, they can't get employees. There are literally businesses closing in our region, like in Ocean City, that's been open for 70 years, and some family businesses that are closing because they can't get employees. So, you know, while the unemployment rate is low, we need to figure out ways to get more people in the workforce. Childcare is a huge component of that. You know, as it relates here, you know, what has happened over the last couple of years, 2.5 years, you know, in some respects had to happen when we flooded the economy with so much money because we closed everything down and put people out of work. But the money that was put into the economy created the demand that created this inflation. And so, you know, from some respects that had to happen, but now we have gone way, way too far to the point where we can't get inflation under control. And, you know, it's impacting the housing market now. You're going to see, as you see rates go up, you know, we're fortunate down here in South Jersey that some of the larger home builders are still building, but there are areas of Maryland and Virginia and DC where some of the national home builders like D.R. Horton have gone dark. They stopped. And so it's definitely a mixed bag of the economy. As it relates to Atlantic City, you know, as we have online gaming becoming more prevalent, as we have competition in other jurisdictions, we have New York gaming coming on, we have some challenges here. We have some challenges we need to face. You know, fortunately, as Lou said, you know, I say it about Atlantic County, I'll say it about South Jersey. You know, as it relates to us down here, we are South Jersey. We don't worry about party. We don't worry about politics. We try to figure out what is best for our region. Of course, we haven't always gotten our fair share, but we work all the time to try to figure out how can South Jersey get the investment we should have. We have some great resources here. You know, we're working hard on the airport. We're working hard on the aviation research facility, try to create some more opportunities and some more jobs, because at the end of the day, that's what it is all about. So some positives, but certainly some challenges that we collectively will all need to face.
Thank you. Let me throw this one question out to all of you, whomever has an idea. If there's one thing the state legislature, that state government, can do in the next 12 months to help South Jersey's economy, one thing, what would that thing do? What's a priority that is actually accomplishable in the next 12 months?
I'll just follow up because I have a lot of money that came in from the federal government. Obviously, we had the biggest state budget in history, and we supported the budget, along with our colleagues. But we need investments in South Jersey. We need public investments in South Jersey. We haven't always gotten our fair share. Everybody knows it down here. North Jersey dominates, the politics a lot of times. And so to the extent that we can invest in the Atlantic City Airport, that we can invest in the research park, we can invest in the rail line, we can make investments in Atlantic City. You guys all came into Atlantic City. There are fabulous buildings here and fabulous resources here. You drive down some of the streets and your head's banging off the roof of your car. So to the extent that we can, get people to recognize we need investment down here, I think that is the most important thing we could see over the next 12 months, because those investments will help spur other investments in the community and will then spur some private dollars getting into the economy. And so that's what I would hope to see, and that's what we're working very hard on.
Anybody else? I mean, we talked about workforce development, but beyond that, or is that really it?
Well, I mean, I think we can handle actually more than one thing at a time. So I'd like to, suggest that I agree with Vince. I think, the one of the important things that we can continue the investment in is infrastructure as a whole. And when I look at the over almost $2 billion between federal and state money in the budget that's going to be put into water infrastructure. That's critically important for this region and the state. As you see the impact of the storms and climate change and what's happening, the ability to invest in that infrastructure makes a difference to secure the infrastructure we have and help to attract businesses. But along with that, the continued investment in public education as a true foundational component of what we build our state on is a reason why, as Vince points to other states that maybe growth has stopped, in New Jersey, we're an attraction because of that education system. People come here to take advantage of a world-class public education system. And then the last thing we passed unanimously in the Assembly that I think we need to focus on now with our friends in the Senate is to pass the unemployment tax relief bill that we worked on so closely, and I think ran out of time at the end of the budget, but we worked very closely with the business community, and really that I think would have a significant impact on, because we're so heavily dominated by small businesses, it would have a significant benefit to people and our residents across the region.
Sure. Anybody else?
Yeah, I can jump in as well. I think both the senator and the majority leader made terrific points that I totally agree with. I think one other thing that we could do for the benefit of South Jersey residents, in fact, for New Jersey residents, is to ensure that the anchor property tax relief checks get out in the mail to the residents so that that becomes part of their budget as they consider setting their own family budgets for the upcoming year. I think the other thing I constantly focus on as someone who has previously worked in the federal government is ensuring that you all, whether it's business leaders or local officials, are truly in a position and preparing for this bipartisan infrastructure law to be really capitalized upon by each of you and your municipalities. I think there are steps that could be taken now to ensure that each of your municipalities are in a position to capitalize on that. And there's going to be dollars that are available for certain projects that I think Senator Polisena was referencing. I do think there are other opportunities, perhaps outside of infrastructure, that could be covered in that sense when we talk about cybersecurity, protecting our town halls, protecting our businesses. Those are on the table, folks, and I think we should all be starting to think about that if we're not already.
I just want to add something that I think transparency is a big part of this, making sure that the municipalities and the constituents know that this money is there, making it accessible. I mean, the biggest complaint that I get to hear from a lot of people in my district is actually getting to the money. They know it's there, but how do they get it from the state to the people that are greatly in need for it? And us all being able to sit at the table and have an open discussion of where the money goes, instead of it being one party dominating where it goes, it should be bipartisan. And that comes with all of us working together. And as Senator Testa had said earlier about building a coalition that is nonpartisan in South Jersey so that we can keep that money coming down here to build up our infrastructure.
Senator, let me go to this next question to you. We wanted to understand, what do people call your office the most about? What issue is the dominant thing that your staff is picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, Senator Polisena's office. What are they asking about? What's the biggest complaint or the issue where they're looking for help?"
I mean, invariably, it is some State Department that won't pick up the phone. And of course, we all saw it. I got in about a year ago. I got locked out, unfortunately, for a period of time, so I couldn't answer the phone. But, you know, unemployment was the biggest issue by far. DMV probably was second, but lagged way behind. And it happened because, one, you couldn't get anybody on the phone. Two, when you were doing the online portal, if you made one mistake, you were like locked out. You couldn't access the system. And so you had to then call the legislator's office, and these guys probably dealt with it more than me because they've been there longer. You couldn't do anything. You were literally locked out. And so we had dominated by calls related to unemployment, DMV, and then other state agencies that you can't get on the phone. I mean, you call up there, they're using outdated technology that has to be upgraded. They were out of work, obviously, home, and so you couldn't get anybody answering the phone. It was a bad situation, and you know that's why we're there, and so we would answer the phone and try to help people through it, but that was the biggest issue. You know, if we can get state government to be responsive to people and pick up the phone, at least get them directed what they need to do, it would be a lot easier for us, but we're happy to do it because that's our job.
Assemblyman Moen, let me go to you. What kind of things are people, is it the same stuff, or Are people calling your office about something else?
Yeah, so I was sworn into the Assembly in January of 2020, which was about 2 months before the COVID pandemic really took off. And I think immediately we began seeing those uptick in calls tied to unemployment. I think as time has gone on, as we look back now, I think that shifted a bit. As the Senator had mentioned, we do get a number of calls that are tied to MVC. I do want to give them credit, though, because they've taken steps to transition a lot of the work that they're doing to an online platform. But just yesterday in the State Assembly Transportation Committee, one of my bills to create a hotline for assistance of those online transactions sailed through the, with bipartisan support through the committee. I think those are things that we're hearing from constituents and then figuring out how to assist them beyond just telling them that they have to stay persistent with those state agencies. The last thing I'll say that's more district specific to my office is we've heard from a number of constituents about the Direct Connect project. I think many of you are aware that in March of 2021, a retaining wall collapsed in that project. And I say this quite often, but for the residents of my district in suburban Camden County, if you had a kid in kindergarten that started kindergarten on the day that project began, they could have their master's degree in engineering by the time it was completed to work on it. And so think about that from an individual household perspective. Those are the calls we're getting. That's impacting daily lives. So from a holistic approach on employment, specific approach, it's tied, I think, more to those types of issues with that project.
Mr. Majority Leader, you have a different kind of leadership rank than the others on the panel. Are these the same kind of calls you're getting, or do you get different calls?
Well, I get calls from everybody in this audience, so that kind of begins there. But, you know, the lifeblood of any legislative office is constituent services, and it depends on what the crisis is of the day. So clearly, the unemployment problem, we handled, without exaggeration, thousands of unemployment claims. And we became an ancillary office, all of our offices did, for our constituents. It's a crisis in the moment, and it points to a deeper problem of the state's failure to invest in the infrastructure again, and the technology to update those systems. We saw it during Superstorm Sandy in a limited space because the storm greatly affected certain regions of the state. But it played out in a very real way during the pandemic. You know, for all the people that I talk to on a regular basis in this audience, they know my feeling. I am not a fan of this remote working. I think you lose so much from interaction, collegiality, brainstorming, strategic planning, and sharing problems. When you're at home dealing with the calls that you may be getting, you may not appreciate the depth of the problem because you're not with your colleagues and having that discussion. I think it's a huge loss. And I think it's something that I would limit if it were me personally. I've limited it with my business and my clients and my office, and I think we're better for it. You know, I will tell you, though, that I think the leading issue and why it was referenced so much in the budget still remains property taxes. And I don't need to get phone calls in my office to know about it. And I think it's kind of sad that we almost stop receiving those calls because people think it's an unsolvable problem, and it's not. And I would like to pull together the task force that we worked on trying to find savings when we did Path to Progress in a bipartisan fashion, and I was proud to serve on it from the Assembly side. I'd like to bring those groups back together from business, education, and government in a bipartisan fashion to really have a strong and reasonable conversation around restructuring how we pay for local governments off of the only state in the country that solely funds it off of property taxes. And I'll just finish with this. Everything else that happened in the pandemic, everybody rolled up their sleeves and stepped in. Property taxes are blinded to those economic realities. Unemployment hit 17%. Unemployment hit 17% in regions of the state during Superstorm Sandy. Unemployment spiked after the economic tsunami of 2008. And in each of those instances, including during this pandemic, property taxes continued to go up. And it was blinded to the fact that you may have lost your job. It was blinded to the fact that you might have lost your health insurance. And it is the most discriminatory tax that we have. And we can do better, and we should do better.
Assemblywoman, just to get you in on this. You're the newest person here. You showed up. What are people calling your office about?
So I was sworn in on January 11th, and we were not able to obtain access to our office till about the 18th of January. And the amount of phone calls that we received about the Department of Labor was very overwhelming. But it was unbelievable how many people had collected their unemployment from the beginning of the pandemic shutdown. I have to say that I have to thank my staff. They have been absolutely incredible of resolving pretty much all of the unemployment issues that we have been granted. We weren't expecting that. The number of people that said that they weren't getting return phone calls prior to us going in there, we had a lot of catching up to do. But we all answer the phones. I mean, if I'm in my office, I'm answering my phone. We recently, the senator and the assemblywoman, we've all kind of taken on our own offices. I'm still waiting for mine to open, but we were kind of forced to do that because the biggest problem that we were experiencing is the ID Me on the Department of Labor website. So many people weren't able to get past that process. If you can't get past that, you can't even get in to start collecting your unemployment. So we were having people have to drive from Bridgeton all the way up to West Deptford. So when you start thinking about the cost of gasoline and they're unemployed and they haven't gotten their unemployment since 2020, it really starts to pull at your heartstrings. And it wasn't just a handful of people, it was a lot of people. So we felt obligated to branch out all over our district. We have a very large district, square miles wise. So I think that we'll be able to service a lot more of our constituents now with the different locations. Another thing that I receive is a lot of calls from seniors. I was just at the Gloucester County Senior Picnic, and not only do I get the phone calls, but it was echoed there from so many people, is the lack of broadband in my district. That's a huge problem. There are many people in Salem County, Cumberland County, and even Gloucester County that don't have access to broadband. The funny story is that the senator did not have broadband until he won an election, and then he got a poll ran, and now he has Comcast. That's surprising that you would hear that in Gloucester County. We can expect that in Cumberland and Salem because of how rural the area is. So that's been something that, you know, Senator Testa finds very important, and myself, that we're working together to make sure that we bring that broadband access to our constituents. But when you're talking to these seniors and they don't have smartphones, they don't have access to broadband, they are, you know, not up to date on how you fill out all these forms to get them assistance with their utilities or their cell phones, it's very overwhelming for them. And I have a very large population of seniors in my district. So that's something that has become a big concern. They're very worried about the upcoming energy costs. Most of my constituents are still trying to catch up on their past utility bills, and now we're going to go into winter, and they're very concerned of how are they going to continue to keep their lights on, their gas on, so they can heat their homes. Those are probably the two biggest concerns, as well as the sex ed curriculum that is being presented in the schools. Those are probably my top three.
I want to shift now to infrastructure, just to talk about that for a moment, and specifically water infrastructure. Just to give some context, you know, among the challenges that our aging water infrastructure system has are both storms that we used to think would happen once a century, but are happening more frequently now, and therefore literally flooding the system. We also have environmental standards and the sort of need for upgrades in terms of clearing water so that it's safe for all of us to drink and use. And there's a lot there, but you know, South Jersey is especially vulnerable to extreme weather events because so much, as has been mentioned, so much of our South Jersey economy relies on tourism and storms that destroy beaches or this infrastructure along the beaches make huge differences in one person being able to make a living off the tourism that should be there over largely 4 months. So Assemblyman Moen, let me start here with you. What kind of fixes are needed? What kinds of, you know, we talked about investing in South Jersey from the state. What things might you consider are the biggest priorities in order to protect our region from extreme weather and to mitigate its effects?
I think that there are a number of things that we as a region, but particularly as a state, could be doing. And we are already starting to do some of these things. I think reducing our carbon footprint is a huge one. We're starting to see certain entities that are, just to use an example, the Delaware River Port Authority, they've begun to install solar panels in most of their parking lots. You're starting to see those types of things take off. Our investment in Paulsboro, that it's tied to our wind energy. I think those pieces, little by little, add to the effort to protect against some of these larger, perhaps whether it's weather issues or flooding, which is important in my district. One example I will bring up in my district is the Brooklawn Circle. There's actually a Facebook group that asks every day if the Brooklawn Circle is flooding. It's sad, but it's the truth. That's something that consistently we're working with local government to try to address. I think one thing we've tried to do over the last few years is work with the Camden County Improvement Authority to put together a study to figure out what ends up causing that flooding and to what extent that is a federal responsibility versus a state responsibility. So that's one example we're working on, but I think in a larger scale, it's reducing our carbon footprint. It's making sure that as we're planning as municipal officials or as the consultants that are working with our municipal governments and state governments, we're keeping resiliency in front of our conversations, in the front of mind. Don't make it something that happens to be after the fact. After plans are hatched and already being built, resiliency should come on the front end of that. And I think as we collectively do our work in state government, that's something that we're seeing that's just becoming more and more of a conversation because just as we saw in Puerto Rico over the last few days, these storms are continuing to devastate us. I think Mullica Hill, the Assemblywoman knows, and most in South Jersey know Mullica Hill last year, we're still rebuilding from that. And these are families that probably would have never expected that to occur. And so we need to make sure that while that may be happening a county away from us and might not have been something that ever impacted our town hall or our families that we represent, that should not be the reason that we're not all thinking about that. And if our local governments are taking the steps to ensure that that's part of the conversation, I think we'll all be better off long term.
Senator Palestina, let me redirect this discussion just a little bit, because one of the challenges of dealing with these kinds of investments that it's expensive. And it's expensive particularly for local governments. Now, there are some municipally owned water companies, and there are others who use one of the private sector entities in order to help deliver their water. Because most communities can't afford it themselves. Private sector at least can raise rates and can, or at least ask to raise rates and move forward with there. What is your take on how we fund how we pay for this kind of local infrastructure and mitigation efforts?
I mean, the state mandates a lot of this stuff, so whether it's federal dollars coming in or state dollars coming in my mind, the state should be paying. One of the things we've done, and we're talking about two different issues here, public water, one of the things the state is now mandating, if anybody is here from New Jersey American Water or any of the regulated utilities, is to replace water lines from the street to people's front doors, going to the yards, which has never happened before. It's going to cost a fortune. And so if the state's going to do something like that, I think the state's got to come up with the dollars to pay. They have allocated some, but I don't think anybody recognizes how much money this is going to cost. And so, we have to do that. In terms of the storms and the climate change, we actually brought the DEP down. I think, we need to work together here. We need some common sense in this stuff. I'll give you one example, and this was with Sean LaTourette, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection. Obviously, we know there are things we need to do for resilience. This PACT regulations, protecting against climate change, would raise the flood elevations another 5 feet. Right now, if we're at 10 or 11, our streets out here are at elevation 6, 7, 8 maybe. But we're going to raise the flood elevation essentially to around 14 or 15. And so structures will have to be built, if you're looking outside, 8 feet above the sidewalks and the roadways. And he said to me, we're going to do that because if we get a future storm, like Sandy or like Ida or one of these things, that people won't be on their first floor dying because they get flooded. And I just sort of said, Sean, If the flood elevation is now 14 and the water is that high, there's nobody in their homes because we're Venice. There's no roads. There's no sidewalk. You can't access the properties. And so we need to use some common sense with these type of things, and we need to get everybody to the table and figure out what is best, because if you raise the structures that much, but your roadways are still down below, the whole island is flooded. There is no more island. And so we acknowledge that we need to address it, but at the same time, we need to use some common sense with this stuff. And certainly, whether it's public water infrastructure or these issues related to storm resiliency, there's going to be a lot of federal and state dollars needed to address both issues.
Anybody else want to offer a comment on water infrastructure before I shift to we got about, yeah.
Listen, I just think, I'm sure Vince sees this. The 10 years that I was very proud to work and represent Remington and Vernick engineers, we saw firsthand local municipalities that were controlling their own water system face that tug of war constantly of rate pressure to make the necessary investments, because as Vince said, it's very expensive. But if you don't make it, we all go in and turn on the faucet and the water comes out, and we just expect it to be 1, instantaneous, 2, to be clean. We don't even think about it. If you don't make the investment, I don't care if it's not putting a new roof on your home or changing the oil in your car. If you don't make the investment, it's going to ultimately come back to haunt you, and it's going to be very expensive. And that's why we worked on legislation a few years ago, more around public-private partnerships, because this investment has to be made. And the good news is there is $2 billion on the way, and $2 billion sounds like a world of money. That's not enough to solve the water infrastructure problem in the state. It has to be ongoing. So you need constant vigilance, you need to be responsible, and you need to make the investment, or it will be costly. But I agree with what the senator said. We need to be reasoned in our approach to this, and I'm a big believer in diversity on our energy sources, a strong foundation on nuclear, safe and secure, and then the expansion in other areas, whether it be wind, solar, and that creates innovation that you're seeing from South Jersey Gas, South Jersey Industries, around transforming their infrastructure to now allow for hydrogen, which helps protect our carbon footprint safer and cheaper. So you don't get there unless you have these pushes. It is definitely a push and a pull, and that's what I'm excited about for the future.
Let me just ask this final question about the infrastructure. Are there lessons from the tragedy that has befallen Puerto Rico right now that we can see from that? And when I say lessons, I think it's just both, we need to invest, but also, are there workforce development? Do we have the people to actually do all of the things that we say we want to do? Moving forward, what are the things we should understand from our time and place that we want to convey to others in state government?
Look, you're right. One of the things I think, we're so pressed for time in panels like this, but each of those investments create jobs. And that allows us to attract people to this state in jobs that maybe we haven't had before, to help, whether it's architectural, engineering, or just, hands-on labor to help get it done. And it's a great opportunity. And look, we learned lessons from Superstorm Sandy. The investment in dunes up and down our beachfront, one of the things we learned from Superstorm Sandy from environmental engineers, and the after effect was nature against nature survived better than nature against man-made. And that creates opportunity, it creates jobs, and it creates a safer environment. So I think, Puerto Rico is so raw and fresh. We're going to continue to learn, but Puerto Rico is getting hit more and more often now. And it's something that we have to understand what the impacts are and how do you build sustainability.
And Ben, if I could just add to that too, from a workforce perspective, us in South Jersey, we have an ability, I think, through the educational infrastructure that we have, to really begin, if not this is happening, but to bolster the connections between our employers and the institutions such as our county colleges that are doing this work, that are reinvesting in workforce development, that are realizing in a college setting, there's the credit side of the house, but then the non-credit side of the house. Recently, I was speaking with American Water, and I was told that one of the trainings that they need for their employees to have to go out and do the work they need to be done, they have to send them to California to get that training done. There's no reason that needs to happen. That can be done in South Jersey. And so that's one thing that I know for sure that Camden County College is looking at exploring to find out if that can be done here as opposed to sending people across the country. But I do think at the end of the day, we have the workforce that's here. It's crucial to know that what we need to know from the employers in the crowd about what the institutions need to do to train this workforce to be prepared to take those jobs. I think that's absolutely crucial. And there are certain programs, such as the Incumbent Worker Training Program, that the Department of Labor has set up that will literally pay to train your employees for upskilling at no cost to the company. It's a cost that's borne by the Department of Labor. Those are things that I think we could all be taking advantage of to prepare for really that next wave of the workforce that we need to respond to some of the issues that we've talked about today.
I need to wrap this up, but I want to do the lightning round on one question, which is most of us in this room would agree that one of the biggest holdups to a stronger economic rebound in the region is the burden, the ongoing burden placed on business by the cost of replacing the depleted UI fund, the Unemployment Insurance Fund. So Majority Leader Greenwald, you've got a bill in, but you're Majority Leader and we didn't get it done yet. So quick, when are we going to see that kind of relief, if we're going to see that kind of relief?
Well, I'm surprised that your answer that question. I thought your research would be better. We did get it done in the Assembly, so which is the House that I'm the Majority Leader of.
You edit yourself for time and you didn't get it all right. Sorry, Paul.
But you're right. I think we had so many things pressing during the budget. We need to work with our colleagues in the Senate, and I think we need, I think, and I had this conversation with the business community. We all, I think, neglected to include the front office in that discussion as we moved what was a bill worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that's really where the holdup ends up, in that you always need to remember it's Civics 101, right? You need the House, you need the Senate, and you need the governor's office.
We should have gotten it done, Ben. It's interesting, the day we were there, we thought we were going to vote on it, and we thought it was going to happen. I think, is it Vin in the Senate that's the prime?
Yes.
Vin Gopal? So it's Vin Gopal is the prime sponsor in the Senate. You see these things going on in the legislature. It's kind of funny sometimes. So we think we're going to vote on it. All of a sudden, you see Vin Gopal get pulled out of the Senate session, and he's going to talk to the administration. I guess there was some conflict there. And then whatever discussion was had, he comes back in and we didn't vote on it. We should have gotten it done. We have to get it done. Businesses need support. They suffered as a result of what happened by state government, and we should compensate them for that. So hopefully we're still going to get it done and recognize that businesses, by and large, that dealt with the pandemic and did the responsible things that were needed to be done should be taken care of. And so, commend Assembly Majority Leader Greenwald for getting it done in the Assembly. Thank you, and hopefully we can get back in the Senate and get that one done, because businesses need support right now.
This will be one of the really wonderful instances of bipartisanship, because it's obviously there's widespread agreement across the political spectrum on this kind of legislation. And in the end, there is much more to cover, but we simply don't have time. I apologize for those who might be frustrated. Wait, we can jump into any of these for a more extended discussion. There is, as I prefaced in the beginning, a lot of chaos out there. But we can thankful that we have these dedicated public servants representing us in Trenton, debating the issues on our behalf, and using organizations like the Development Council to help forge a consensus. Please join me in thanking our four esteemed panelists and our hosts today. And thus concludes our panel. I believe I turn it back over to Marlene. Thank you all.
Ben, did I get a watch?
Yeah.
I get to keep that?
No.
I thought it was a gift for letting him speak today.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Glenn Davila. I am the chairman of the SNJDC, and in my spare time, I am the president of performance marketing. Just a little housekeeping before we leave. Before you get up, everybody should have a little ticket like this at your seat. That is your discounted parking voucher. Make sure you pick that up. Let's go ahead and get into the thank yous, because I'm the only thing standing between you and this afternoon's enjoyable time at the pool deck. So thank you to our South Jersey legislators, all of whom are participating in these two panel discussions. We appreciate your willingness to engage in this back and forth on policy matters that impact our membership and our region. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your government service. I also want to acknowledge all of the board members from the SNJDC. You know who you are. Thank you all for coming here. It's your leadership and commitment that makes this organization strong in helping to build a better South Jersey for all of us. Thank you all of you who attended today. I hope you found the program informative. Let's thank some of our sponsors: AT&T down front over here, Atlantic City Electric, Comcast, Jefferson Health New Jersey, New Jersey American Water, New Jersey Natural Gas, PCS, PSE&G Nuclear, Rowan University, Sheet Metal Workers, Local Union 19, South Jersey Gas, and our lanyard sponsor, ELEC 825. Everybody, you got nice lanyards, take it home and use it every day to remind you of our sponsor. Special thanks to I Love Resorts, where I had my first day job. Love Resorts, this is great. They always do such a nice job. Special thanks to the Sound Off Planning Committee. You pulled it off again. Congratulations. Lisa especially, you guys, great leadership on this. SNJD staff, SNJDC staff, always the heart of everything we do. You guys are wonderful. Stokes Creative Group, taking pictures and video for us. Thank you very much, guys. And all of the others, so many others who have helped to make this a successful event. We also have, for our poolside event this afternoon, sponsored by GEI Consultants, Infinity Energy, Legacy Treatment Services, New Jersey Community Capital, Rowan College of South Jersey, and the South Jersey Port Corporation, where we continue to do some networking and have some refreshments. So to get there, out the door, make a left. There are a couple of elevators in the bank. Take that to the third floor on the left, and you're at the pool. So thank you, everybody. You're free to go. Go back to work? No?